So just to clarify for Strode's Act, and I just want to say one thing I've noticed when that book went missing in the post, that statute law book, a very old one that was falling to bits that I wanted for Strode's Act, just vanished in the post. Like the package arrived with nothing inside it, right? And the sender swears that they sent it. The version of that statute law that I found online on the internet, PDF file of it, which is where I printed it out from, and I've put it as the thumbnail of the other video. You'll see in the top corner that it says John Adams. Someone's actually written on it John Adams and joined up writing. In the actual, it looks like it was actually on the book when they scanned it in, whichever university or college scanned this book in. And I was thinking, well, it's. I've just realised now that in Parliament the clerk is Eve Sampson. It's quite a rare. There aren't that many people called Eve anymore, right? Eve Sampson, right? And on the book, on this statutes book for that Strode law, someone's written John Adams. It's like Adam and Eve. I just thought I'd mention that. But anyway, so when interpreting Strode's Act, well, it's only 3 lines, right? But there are 2 main words that are important in there. And one of them is concerning, right? Concerning Parliament. And the other one is of Parliament. So we want to extract 2 words. And obviously, if you're only writing 3 lines of legislation, you want to have the full and complete meaning of the words. A lot of these MPs, when the MPs are writing these reports and discussing things, they always want they always say, "Oh well, the old law, it's not very clear. It's not very clear." Well, no, it's clear when you understand the language. You don't write paragraphs and paragraphs when you don't need to, right? It's clear when you understand the full word. It's like if you get a zip file and you extract it, right? If you get a zip file, right, you have to extract it to get to the content and folders, and they don't really want to read and interpret the words to the full meaning. They're choosing to interpret it a certain way when they don't want it to mean something, and then when they want it to mean more, they extract it, to mean more. But a lot of these words have meaning which they used to be using the full context of their meaning, right? Particularly the more back in the past you go, right? Now, the easiest out of these words is concerning, right? Because there's not, in the Samuel Johnson dictionary, he just hardly write anything about concerning. He simply puts for concerning, from concern. This word originally, participle, has before a noun the force of a preposition, right? Relating to, with relation to. So concerning is, it comes with a relation to something, right? Or it is relating to something, right? But it says a preposition, the force of a preposition. So you have something, it's you've got a thing relating to something, right? Because if there's nothing there, you can't relate to it. It's like you can't have a daughter relating to a father if you don't have a daughter, right? You don't have any relatives, right? So if so what I mean to say is, if you've got like a father with no daughter, and if he doesn't have, his parents aren't alive anymore, you don't have any relatives, right? You got no relations, right? So that word's pretty simple and easy to do, right? And then we go on to this word of. Now, the word of is actually quite complicated. For one little word of, Samuel Johnson Dictionary is actually written effectively all this. All this here, look at all this. Still scrolling now. Still scrolling, still... There's 23 examples. 23 examples just to describe of, right? And we're going to go through them. So concerning Parliament, that is relating to it. You have to have some relation, right? Well, obviously MPs, right? They're not only related to Parliament; they're part of Parliament, right? They don't just relate to it. You see, the MPs are of Parliament, right, and the clerks are of Parliament, but also the MPs are also each of their shire or area, right? But you notice that when you say of Parliament, right, when you say the clerks are of Parliament and the MPs are of Parliament, right, then if you say, well, what about the electors or what about the constituents, right, and what about their affairs and matters? Then you can confidently say, well, their affairs and matters are of Parliament, definitely relating to Parliament, and their matters, their cases, their causes are definitely relating to Parliament, even if they themselves aren't of Parliament, right? But we can go into this a bit more. There's two words that came up, even just trying to suss out of, and one is superlative. So superlative means it's the highest degree, the highest quality or degree. So when we say superlative, it is of the highest quality or degree. So that's kind of like some sort of excellence or caliber, right? And then we've got the word substantive, right, which is having a firm basis in reality and so important, meaningful, or considerable. There is no substantive evidence for the efficacy of these drugs. So, if there weren't, then it wouldn't be important, meaningful, or firm. Another example, having a separate and independent existence. So substantive is having a separate and independent existence, right? But having a firm basis in reality and so important, meaningful, or considerable. Right, so the word of says it's a Saxon word. So here, so the first one we've got, it is put before the substantive that follows another in construction, as of this part were slain, that is part of these, I can instantly rise up the grass of the full 3,000. So that's a Shakespeare excerpt. So it is put before the substantive that follows another in construction, right? So before the substantive, right? So before having a firm basis in something being important or meaningful, but also if you put it before having a separate and independent existence, right? You could say that the electors themselves have a separate and independent existence, right? When you're thinking about, if you want something to relate to Parliament or be of it, you might want it to have a firm basis in the Parliament or an important relation to Parliament or an important connection or a meaningful one or a considerable one, right? Of put before the substantive that follows an other in construction. Well, it's very interesting that the word follows comes up right here. Well, right, it's very interesting that the word follows comes up because we're talking about being of Parliament, right? Of Parliament or then we also said in connection with Parliament, right? So all these things that we're going to be talking about with these words, like having a connection to something or being of the thing, right? The word follows is important because when we had those writs of privilege, the sample ones out of the 1628 book, the writ of privilege, it said that, members of Parliament or servants or their followers, right? It said followers. Now that's interesting when we're getting onto this language and we're looking at this very 3-line poetic Strode's Act, which, not unlike the 1688 Bill of Rights, which was a lot later, remember that if they're going to only write 1 line or 2 lines, they might not just write it as simpletons, They might not write, we're stupid, we're retarded, we only need to write 3 lines, right? Whereas if there's a lot more to write, usually the shorter the writing, the more poetic or symbolic or great literature. They say that the greatest literature goes into the shortest sentence, right? And if they're writing paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, it's usually not necessarily going to be very deep or meaningful. Whereas like a book of poetry, is to reflect upon, right? And in that sense, you could say that the entire 2013 to 14 Parliamentary Privileges Report, seeing that I've had it printed out and it just goes on and on and on and on. It's like endless to try and read it. There's so much there, but it's all much ado about nothing, kind of nonsense, and not necessarily correct or right. Yeah, I'm not saying the information they've got it doesn't include true facts, but what I'm saying is their debates, arguments, and persuasive discussion is it's persuasive at most. It's opinion. A lot of it's opinion, right? It's pure opinion. A lot of it. They throw a lot of facts in there, and there's a lot of very, very valuable information imparted in there, like spill the beans, right? But they're still trying to superimpose their opinion on it. So it's a hell of a lot of opinion, right? Rather than the legislation is, meant to be, the law's the law. At the end of the day, we go by what the law says, right? Not necessarily someone's opinion, right? And that opinion, it's not even the outcome of a court case or judgment. It's just a report, right? So this substantive is put before the substantive that follows in another in construction. It's interesting that if you're writing a petition, you're actually making something, constructing something, right? Which will come before submitting it to Parliament, right? Obviously it follows that you will then submit it, right? It follows that if you investigated something, then you will draft a paper, create a paper, make a paper, a report yourself and submit it in. It will follow that it will get sent in. So along those lines of thinking, that's what I'm thinking with this of, right? So, it's put for the substantive. And a substantive is a firm basis in. The petition had a firm basis in its relationship to Parliament because it was addressed to the Lords, Commons, Burgesses, Knights and citizens assembled in the Parliament. So therefore it had a firm basis in the Parliament and a strong connection to it. And it was important because prayers and statements and a claim a serious claim was made. It was very meaningful for and wanted Parliament to consider it, considerable. It was to be considered. So we're already really into this already. Now what was the other meaning? All men naturally fly to God in extremity, and the most aesthetic person in the world was forsaken all hopes. There of a relief is forced to acknowledge him. There's a lot of interesting reflections here that you can have. Right, number two here, right? So here we've got number 2, right? It is put among superlative adjectives, the most renowned of all those whom the name is given, Filipina, right? So it is put among superlative adjectives. So superlative is of the highest quality or degree. So for adjectives, an adjective is a word that modifies or describes a noun or pronoun. Right, so you can get the red apple. So red is an adjective that describes the apple, so the apple is red, right? So that would mean that it is the highest degree or strongest possibility, the strongest example or manifestation of this. So, the red apple is red, right? Because the apple might not necessarily be red until it's described as a red apple, right? So, of something, so the colour red is of the apple if it is red, right? And if the apple is green, the greenness is of the apple, right? So it would mean that to the highest quality or degree. So that means to have it of, so to say it was of Parliament, right? Of Parliament, the word of would be used to the highest possible manifestation of describing something, right? So, if it was definitely of Parliament, so that would suggest that now some of these examples then of at midnight, the most dismal and unseasonable time of all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. We are not to describe our shepherds as shepherds at this day really are, but as they may be conceived then to have been. That's quite interesting because we're actually trying to describe this. We are not to describe our privileges and parliaments at this day really are, but as they may be conceived then to have been, right? When the best of men followed the employment. That's almost literally like saying, this modern report now is a load of tosh, and it doesn't properly reflect the way it was being before in Strode's Act, right? That would be quite appropriate to that. This paragraph here, sort of example, that would be a good comparison to this situation. Peace of all worldly blessings is the most valuable. 3 from. So you can have the word of can mean from. It can mean from. So of Parliament can mean from it, coming from Parliament. The captain of the Helots with a blow whose violence grew fury, not of strength, or of the strength proceeding of fury, struck Pallas upon the side of the head. One that I brought up, saved from drowning, it was cut. Right, so another meaning, number 4. Meaning number 4, concerning or relating to. So it says the quarrel is not now of fame and tribute, or of wrongs done unto confederates, but of your own republic. This cannot be understood of the first disposition of the wars. So actually, ironically, the two words we want to consider in that Strode's Act, it says that concerning, right? So concerning Parliament. But when we're looking at the word, well, what does the word of mean? So the word of can also mean concerning, right? So one of the main, this is from Samuel Johnson's dictionary, and this is like one of the earliest dictionaries that there is, right? Most closest to that time possible, right? The word of can also mean concerning, right? So why didn't in Stuart's Act they put, concerning Parliament twice or of Parliament twice, right? They use one or the other. So they were very, very, very choosy about that word of. They could have put from Parliament or, they could have used any word they want, right? They could have used they could have used the word in Parliament, but it said they particularly used the word of. And if you're only going to use 3 sentences for an entire provision of law, you're going to be using the word of to its most substantive poetic manifestation of it, I would have thought. Particularly that they'd already used the word concerning Parliament once, and then they decided to use then of Parliament, right? So we've got out of. So we've got from, right? From Parliament, but also you can have out of, right? Of it can be like out of. Because, like, obviously you can have, like, the core of an apple or the seeds of an apple of the apple, but they also can come out of it, right? You can have orders and announcements declared or issued from Parliament that if they're coming out of Parliament, yet of this little he had some to spare, to feed the famish and to clothe the bare. So now, the 6th meaning for of is among. So not just coming from or out of, but also amongst. Among. So definitely now we're thinking of Parliament. So you're thinking of like the ministers assembled, right? So if the ministers are in there assembled, they're among them, right? But then again, the clerk's among them, the speaker's among them, the prime minister's among them, and anyone who's called for evidence is among them, right? We could read at what the word among means. That would be interesting. He is the only person of all others for an epic poem. All of our heroes thou cannot boast alone. So we definitely got among there. In fact, I might just have a quick look. So it says here, among, for among you can have situated more or less centrally in relation to several other things, or being a member of or members. So that would suggest being a member. See what Samuel Johnson says. He says mingled with, placed with other persons or things on every side. It's things on every side. So that could also mean like, if it's on every side, that includes like, you can have an opposition. Obviously, like you could say the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats are amongst the members of Parliament, right? But you've got different persons converge. So if you say the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, and the Conservatives are amongst the members of Parliament, what you've actually got are several different groups of parties, right, who are together as a body. So, but amongst the members of Parliament are Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, Green Party, Reform UK, and the staff and clerks of Parliament, are amongst the people assembled. But then again, you can say the people in the gallery are amongst the people assembled in the Parliament, right? The people in the gallery of the Parliament are amongst the people assembled, right? But you could even say, Parliament was circled by a very large, demonstration of thousands of people, and Parliament was amongst the building of Parliament was amongst the assembly, But that might be pushing it a bit too far. But conjoined with others so as to make part of the number. Conjoined. So that suggests an assembly, right? Conjoined, an assembly, as to make part of the number. I couldn't find out for conjoined, so among. Nothing I can call to mind any clergyman of my own acquaintance who is wholly exempt from this error. That's interesting because it's got the word exempt. Neither can I call to mind any clergyman of my own acquaintance who is wholly exempt from this error. Neither can I call to mind clergymen of my own acquaintance. So that's just saying, like, of your own acquaintance. So it's like your own consciousness and life and knowledge. You can have, persons who are of your own acquaintance and persons who aren't, right? So that's, persons you have a connection with in a way. Number 7. By this sense was once very frequent, but is not now in use. It's almost like the right to petition, isn't it? It's the right to petition, was once very frequent when they had the Tumultuous Petitioning Act, but now it's not in little use because, they don't go to the courts through it anymore. It's like the privilege was once very frequent, but now is not in use. That's a good one, isn't it? Or how about, the constituents, the freedom of speech of the constituents in the constituent office was once very frequent, but now is not in use since they've been disregarding it, That thou greatest states by her supporters, then you choose by the finger of the Almighty's hand. I was friendly entertained of the English consul. I was friendly entertained of the English consul. Less a more honourable man than those forbidden of him. 6. According to. So for of Parliament, you can have one of the legitimate words and meanings of the word is according to, right? So of Parliament, so the laws of Parliament according to, right? So you could say this committee reports of Parliament, right? So apparently the committee report is according to Parliament, right? So it's according to. So it can actually just be according to Parliament, right? According to the law, or according to the rules, or according to the procedures or processes of Parliament. Therefore, of Parliament can be according to Parliament, right? We sharply and severally indicate not only the fact, but any practice against the state. The Senate and people of Rome, of their accustomed greatness, will sharply and severely vindicate not only any fact, but any practice against the state. Well, that's actually really, really important here because how about the word? Let's use an example of Parliament. Then we could say, according to the Parliament and people of London, of their accustomed greatness, will sharply and severely vindicate not only any fact, but any practice against the state. Well, that's the thing. The practice of petitioning is against the state, but you're allowed to do it, which is quite ironic in that example. They do of right belong to you, being most of them first preached amongst you. Right, meaning number 9. Noting power, ability, choice, or spontaneity with the reciprocal pronoun. Noting power, ability, choice, or spontaneity. Well, that choice, there's a word that appears in these examples when, like, you know, like the word prefer, because, like, in all of the old literature, they used to say, in all of the old petitions, this is actually a very, very frequently used word. They used to say, I prefer my petition into the House of Commons, or I preferred my petition into the House of Lords, or they say, I preferred my petition into the Court of Chancery, or I preferred my petition into the Court of the Exchequer, right? To prefer it is your choice, right? It's choice. Right? Noting power, ability, choice, or spontaneity. You say, so if you're going to be spontaneous about something, you're going to say, right, I'm going to petition Parliament. Suddenly someone might tell you, apparently Parliament are going to, make a law to ban smoking. And you say, well, spontaneous. Well, I'm going to petition against it, right? That's spontaneity, right? But you've got the ability to choose. You got the choice to do that, and you got the choice to oppose it or support it. And we've also got the ability to do it because, you got to have the right to do it, and it's got to exist, right? Interesting that it's for noting power, because obviously you're using a right. So, of Parliament, so you could say, like, what was the previous one? Sorry. According to the rights of the subjects and the functions of Parliament, we have got the ability and choice to spontaneously petition them, right? Noting that we have that privilege. So that's noting power. So that's a good example for that, of Parliament. The petition is of Parliament, right? So that would fit with explanation number 9. The Venice glasses would crack of themselves. But the eternal, infinite, and one who never did begin, who never did end, on him belongs. On him all beings as their source depends. First the cattle, Dryden. To assert mankind to have been of himself without... to assert mankind to have been of himself and without a cause. To assert mankind to have been of himself and without a cause hath this invincible objection against it, that we plainly see every man to be from another. That's quite interesting. Like, every man is ultimately from another, because we all came from the same origin in a way. All men are from man, but you might not actually be from another man directly, but in some sense you are. To assert mankind to have been of himself and without a cause. You see, if you have got a parliamentary cause, right? What was it caused by? Was it caused? If Keir Starmer suddenly says, we're going to ban, boxing, right? Then that is of Parliament, because it comes out of Parliament and it's from Parliament. So when he says, right, we're going to make this law, that's of and from Parliament, right? So the cause itself, right, it's with a cause of Parliament. The cause is Parliament and of Parliament, right? Have this invincible objection against it, right? So, and this invincible objection against it, which arises spontaneously, right? Like it said up here, the ability, choice of spontaneity and the power and right to do it. So these are all kind of interconnected together. A free people, as soon as they fall into any acts of civil society, do of themselves divide into three powers. However, it was a civil angel or elf, for he never could have filed it so well of himself. That I think that rhymes. That's a rhyme. Noting properties, qualities, or conditions. So, of something can note properties, qualities, or conditions, right? Properties, qualities, or conditions of Parliament. So you're noting the properties of Parliament, you're noting the qualities of Parliament, or conditions of Parliament. Well, the law of England are conditions of Parliament. They're conditions that are set that we have to comply and abide by. The law of Parliament is of Parliament, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be in Parliament, right? Because the law of Parliament is, everywhere. I've got it printed out, like on these papers here. These statute law books that I have at the side of me now with Strode's law on are of Parliament. I'm noting their properties, qualities, and conditions, right? In fact, the condition of the book that I bought was that it was falling to pieces, right? But it never arrived here because it vanished. He was a man of decayed fortune and of no good education. The colour of a body may be changed by a liquor of itself. He is of no colour. Man may suspend the act of his choice from being determined. A man may suspend the act of his choice from being determined for or against the thing proposed till he has examined whether it be really of a nature in itself and consequences to make him happy or not. Right, we'll get on to another meaning now. Number 11. Noting extraction. Noting and extraction of Parliament. Right, so that's like, so obviously when I just did that example then, when I gave the example of this Strode's Act, I took an extract from it. I've took a law, statute, a book from the Parliament, and I've taken an example of a particular law or paragraph from the page. Therefore, it's an extract from Parliament. It's of it, right? In a way, every MP. But when you're at the MP's constituency office, the MP is of Parliament, right? Because he's been extracted out of it. But he's actually still from the Shire. He's of the Shire, but he's of the Shire and of the Parliament, of both. Mr. Rao was born of ancient family in Devonshire. For that many ages, he had a handsome figure in their country. Noting adherence or belonging, right? So, of Parliament can note adherence or belonging. So, of Parliament can be to adhere to Parliament, right? Laws of Parliament are to be complied with and adhered to or belonging to. They're the properties of Parliament. These acts belong to Parliament, but everyone has a copy of them. I suppose just like every hymn book belongs to the Christian faith, right? Every hymn book or Bible belongs to the Christian faith. They're of Christianity, but everyone has got one of them, right? all the petition. So this is that example's hit the nail on the head with the petitions, right? Like that they're petitioning it. Petitioning is of Parliament, right? To the honourable lords, burgesses, knights, and citizens assembled in the Parliament, right? It's of a parliamentary matter or cause, affair. Pray that in towns and temples of our own, the name of great entities may be known. It's another rhyme, that's Shakespeare. Pray that in towns and temples of our own, the name of great entities may be known. Number 13. Noting the matter of anything. Noting the matter of anything. So you note the matter of it. Of Parliament. The chariot was all of cedar, gilt and adorned with crystals, save that the fore end with the panels of sapphires set in borders of gold and hinder ends of emeralds. Noting the matter of a thing. So that, the cause, so the petition is the thing and the cause is the actual, is the thing that's noted on the paper, right? And still they're in response to something that obviously has happened or occurred, or in response to something. So, commonly the materials which ancient Smith their ships of were the wild ash, the evergreen oak and beech, and the alder. Noting the motive. It was not of my own choice I undertook this work. Well, ain't that everyone's story? Noting form or manner of existence. Noting something that has some particular quality. Right, this number 17 is, I've highlighted that one, it's quite important. Noting faculties of power granted. That's of part. So Strode's that actually number 17 actually describes Strode's Act, right? What is Strode's Act? It's 3 lines of legislation in a statute law from the Parliament of England about the privileges of Parliament, right? And what it actually does is it notes faculties of power that are granted. If any man minister, let him do it as the ability which God giveth. If any man minister, let him do it as the ability of which God giveth. So if any man minister, let him do it as the ability of which God giveth. This is straight out of Samuel Johnson Dictionary. It's almost like number 17 is so fitting to that Strode's Act, not noting faculties of power granted. Well, that's what it's doing. I wouldn't have been surprised if Samuel Johnson didn't actually know about that and know that it's got the word of Parliament in it, because that number 17 could not be more fitting to Strode's Act. Strode's, the entire, we're talking about one word in the Act or 2 words. What does the word concerning mean? Or what does the word of mean, of Parliament, right? Well, what does Strode's Act, this is like, how could you describe the meaning of Strode's Act? What does Strode's Act mean? What is the meaning of this? It's noting faculties of power granted. I mean, and that's 2, 3, 5 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 words which perfectly describe Strode's Act. 3 sentences, 3 full sentences. it is making note of faculties of power which have been granted. I mean, that you couldn't have it any more perfect than that. That number 17 is just fits perfectly. Noting preference or postponements. Nothing of change of one, or noting change of one state to another. Noting causality. So you can have of Parliament can note causality. Noting proportion. Noting kind or species. To cultivate the advantage of success. So noting kind or species. So, I mean, you can have kinds and species of different types of law. So you can got civil law is a species of law. Criminal law is a species of law. And then you can have, obviously, parliamentary law as a species of law. It's put before an indefinite expression of time. And that's it. So, but number 17, I think I might even put number 17 into the title of this video, because it couldn't, that couldn't actually be more fitting. I'm sure Samuel Johnson, obviously being someone who's into literature and language, I wouldn't have been surprised if there's something in that there, noting faculties of power granted of, the word of. Although you've got the word of is it's in the right to petition as well. The right of the subjects.